The 7th October terror attack on Israel by Hamas has caused a long shadow over the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA. Several staff members of UNRWA have been accused of being involved in the attack. The accusations have sparked a crisis of confidence and triggered funding cuts from major donors, including the United States, Germany, Italy, and other European nations. Can this be the beginning of the unraveling of the United Nations itself? Notably, there have been calls for reforms in the United Nations bodies for years, including the recent one by billionaire Elon Musk. The charges against the now expelled contractors of UNRWA are serious. Israel has alleged that the attackers had the IDs given by UNRWA. Furthermore, the agency facilities and vehicles were misused in the assault. UNRWA has denied the direct involvement in the attack. However, their initial response was delayed. It was in contrast to their response and statements to the so-called human rights violations in Gaza. The disproportion between the timings of the comments coming from UNRWA raised concerns about the agency's neutrality and its potential infiltration by Hamas. There is a lack of transparency regarding the recruitment of UN staff in conflict zones. Standard operating procedures, SOPs, to ensure persons with vetting interests in volatile regions remain elusive. It has raised questions about the possibilities of loopholes and vulnerabilities within UN agencies. The opacity of the recruitment process only adds up to the case against the UN, as it may lack accountability and strict vetting procedures. It has to be pointed out that the hiring policies of UNRWA have been under the radar multiple times. The Government Accountability Office report in May 2009 talked about the measures to prevent accidental payments to terrorists under Palestinian aid programs. It was then pointed out that UNRWA was not doing pre-employment screening of the staff. The screening was done once every 6 months. Furthermore, UNRWA should have included Hamas and Hezbollah in the list of organizations during the screening process. Interestingly, the U.S. body found that UNRWA needed to assess the control for all cash assistance programs. Things have not changed much in over a decade. Regarding the United Nations bodies, the 7th October incident is not an isolated case. Other UN bodies have regularly come under the radar for lack of transparency, unnecessary meddling in a country's affairs, and inability to function correctly. Take the example of the World Health Organization, WHO. It delayed and ultimately failed to properly conclude the investigation into the origins of COVID-19. United Nations Human Rights Council, or UNHRC, has a long history of meddling in the affairs of several countries, including India. Such shortcomings cast doubt on the UN's effectiveness and raise concerns about how it can uphold its core principles. India has always been a leading voice for reform within the United Nations. It has long advocated for a fairer and more representative Security Council. The current structure is dominated by the US, the UK, France, Russia, and China as its permanent members. Such leadership fails to reflect the realities of the 21st century, with emerging powers such as India, Brazil, and the African Union. There are cracks in the United Nations facade, and no one can deny it. The crisis that emerged on the sidelines of the terror attack on Israel, followed by the tension in the region, presented a crucial opportunity for introspection and reform. It is high time that the United Nations comprehensively address the charges against UNRWA with complete transparency. Merely funding cuts are not going to work. Robust SOPs for staff recruitment in conflict zones are essential to regain the trust of the member nations. Furthermore, reforming UN bodies to sync them with the global power shift is long overdue and should happen sooner rather than later. On the 7th October, Hamas terrorists launched an all-out attack on Israel from sea, land, and air. At least 5,000 rockets were launched into Israel from Gaza, and tunnels were used to breach the Israeli territory and butcher Israeli civilians, particularly in the border villages. A music festival hosting more than 200 people was turned into a slaughter ground with many women raped, mutilated, and abducted to Gaza. At least 1,300 people, including some foreign nationals, babies, women, and senior citizens, died in the attacks. More than 200 were abducted and taken to Gaza. Following the attack, Israel launched a counterattack to eliminate Hamas. The Israel-Hamas war entered its 114th day on the 29th January 2024. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, was created by the United Nations General Assembly in 1949. Its primary mission is to offer humanitarian aid and protection to registered Palestine refugees within its designated operational area. UNRWA operates in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. UNRWA facilitates the realization of the full potential in human development for Palestine refugees by delivering high-quality services in education, healthcare, relief and social services, protection, camp infrastructure and enhancement, microfinance, and emergency assistance. The agency relies heavily on voluntary contributions for its funding. Israel has provided information to the agency that its employees were involved in conspiring the terrorist attack by Hamas on 7th October 2023. In response to the allegations, the UNRWA has terminated the employees and launched an investigation. The Israel-Hamas conflict started after this terrorist attack. Israel is in the middle of a war against Hamas following the terrorist attack.